In this video, we're going to be going through the TryHackMe pre-security path, and we're wrapping it up with the Windows section on this pathway. And we are on part 2 of Windows operating system, so let's dive right in. But actually, before we dive right in, let me specify that you can walk through all of this on TryHackMe with me as I'm talking. There are interactive labs and different checks on learning that you can use as you walk through, so I highly encourage that you do that. Now let's talk about system configuration, and this is where you can get a lot of customization options on your experience within Windows. But this also gives you a lot of options when trying to troubleshoot startup problems. So if you go down to your taskbar and you type in msconfig, you'll have the option for system configuration, and you can kind of look through here to kind of see what is going on. But there are 5 tabs that you can use to investigate: General, Boot, Services, Startup, and Tools. In the General tab, we'll see some of the more general settings for your machine's boot up process. In Boot, we will actually see where it is booting up from. So by default, it should be /Windows in the C drive. In the Services tab, you'll see a lot of the services that run in the background and their state. In the Startup tab, you may or may not see anything. So, definitely check it out on your own system and see if you see anything interesting. They note on the VM that you won't see anything interesting, and they show a screenshot, which, doesn't really show anything either. And then, of course, in the Tools tab, you have different kinds of tools that you can use on your system. Now, in the last video, we talked about user account control, and you can actually set some of the actual user account control settings to actually have different experiences and different security settings and so forth with every different user. They do note, don't turn these settings off. Definitely don't. But here they show a picture of the slider that pops up, and that basically will dictate when you are notified or how often you're notified when programs or applications are changed. Next, let's go to computer management. And this is actually another very important place to remember while you're on Windows, because there's a lot of settings and customization tools here that really you want to be able to be aware of and use. For instance, you'll have system tools, you'll have storage, and then you'll have service and applications. And inside of each one of those categories, you have a bevy of other kinds of options. So within system tools, you can see you have task manager, event viewer, and some more options. In storage, you have disk management. That's where you can partition parts of your disk if you'd like different partitions. It's really there's a lot of options at your disposal to make changes to your Windows machine. One of the important ones that you want to know about is event viewer, and that basically allows you to view some of the events that are going on your machine. Sounds pretty straightforward. There are also options to check out some of the logs on your machine. You can also check out some of the shared folders. There's also a performance monitor that you can check to make sure everything's running efficiently. So that's pretty cool. And then of course you have the device manager, which will show your device and then any kinds of other devices. Maybe you have like a keyboard or a monitor or something like that attached to your machine. And this is where you can kind of check those out and make sure that everything is working properly. Sometimes you might have an issue where a Bluetooth device isn't working, or for instance, if you're gaming and you have a game controller and it's not working properly, you might want to check the device monitor and check some of the settings. Maybe there's a driver that might be disabled. That's a common issue there. Under the storage settings, you can see some of the different disk management options. And here, of course, you can partition different parts of your disk. If say you want to have a separate partition specifically for something, this is where you can do that. There's a ton of other settings. So, just kind of look around in here, make sure that you don't make any changes unless you know exactly what you're trying to accomplish. You don't want to break anything. That would be very, very bad. Next, let's talk about system information. And this is per Microsoft. Windows includes a tool called Microsoft System Information. You can find this with msinfo32.exe. This tool gathers information about your computer and displays a comprehensive view of your hardware, system components, and software environment, which you can use to diagnose computer issues. That's a pretty powerful tool that you can definitely use while troubleshooting. Say there's a problem, this might be a good option to check out. And of course, you have the system summary, hardware resources, components, and software environment, each with their own options that you can use to be able to diagnose things. One of the other important things to keep in mind is something called environment variables, and this is from Microsoft. Environment variables store information about the operating system environment. This information includes details such as the operating system path, the number of processors used by the operating system, and the location of temporary folders. The environment variables store data that is used by the operating system and other programs. For example, the Windows environment or Windows directory environment variable variable contains the location of the Windows installation directory. Programs can query the value of this variable to determine where Windows operating system files are located. And you can see that in the software environment tab. And it will have all kinds, as you can see, of information that you can look at. Next, we can talk about the resource monitor. And this is where you can kind of get an idea on how much resources different processes are using on your CPU. And you'll be able to see the process ID, the name, how much CPU is actually being utilized, the description of the process, how, the status of the process itself, how many threads are being run. So this is a pretty comprehensive breakdown of processes that are running, and that can be very, very handy when trying to troubleshoot resource-intensive tasks that might be bogging your system down. There's a number of categories here that are really just giving you different information pieces about running tasks, but definitely work your way through here in case this is, something that you're going to want to work with in the future while trying to troubleshoot different programs that are running on your system. Again, this will show everything from both the CPU, the network utilization, the disk utilization. It's pretty awesome. Next, you have everybody's favorite thing, the command prompt, and this is where you can input commands into Windows. Some basic commands is who am I, similar to on Linux, where it basically will just return what user account you're running as. The host name, which will return what the name of the actual machine is. On Linux, we typed in ifconfig to get the IP address of our system, and other networking information. But on Windows, you type ipconfig, so a little confusing, but it'll basically display all the same stuff. If you want to check ongoing network connections, you can use the netstack command, and there's a number of flags that you can use to get specific pieces of information. And there's even more commands that you can use in Windows that are all pretty awesome. But before we wrap this up, let's talk about the Registry Editor. This, as Microsoft says, is a central hierarchical database used to store information necessary to configure the system for one or more users, applications, and hardware devices. The registry contains information that Windows continually references during operations such as profiles, applications installed, property sheet settings, the hardware, and ports being used. So a pretty comprehensive breakdown, and that's really handy to be able to get information on users and other things like that. TryHackMe does leave a warning here that this is used for advanced usage, and making changes can affect the normal computer operation. So definitely bear that in mind when you're trying to make edits on here, that you're actually going to be impacting how the machine functions. So definitely be careful, make sure that you know what you're doing while you're making changes. And that will be the end of part 2. On the top video, that'll be part 3, and we will actually be wrapping up this entire series in that video. So check that out if it's published by this point, and if not, then check out the playlist below for the rest of the pre-security walkthrough pathway. With that, I'll see you all next time.